Think of Korea as a chessboard. This is North Korea, this is South Korea. North Korea began to invade South Korea, and they had superior weapons and training, so they began to decimate the South Korean Army's forces. Now, the South Korean Army's forces were able to just barely hold them off long enough for the United States to come in. America and the United Nations began to join the battle. You're going to speed this scene up, aren't you?
Probably.
Good. The North Korean Army, backed by the United States Army and the United Nations Army, became United Nations Command. And they began to destroy North Korean forces. For the next while, a series of battles took place. It was pretty much back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. No one was really winning. But then, through the cunning of the U.S. Army and General Douglas MacArthur's plans, they were able to start pushing forward. And they had driven the North Koreans almost to the end of Korea. President Harry Truman gave the green light to take all of Korea, but the North Koreans had an ace up their sleeve. China snuck 200,000 elite soldiers into Korea under the cover of night. This forced the UNC soldiers to quickly retreat behind the 38th parallel, where a large defensive had been set up. Okay, at this point, the war basically became a stalemate. Each side had some battles that they won, but neither was able to make as big of an advance as they had before. It just basically was a stalemate at the 38th parallel, which is where it's divided to this day. Because the stalemate had gone on for so long, the United Nations and the United States were getting together to draft up a negotiation to try and end the war with the Chinese and North Koreans. President Truman had notified General Douglas MacArthur, the main commander of the UNC forces, that they were drafting up this plan, and in response, General MacArthur gave his own, drafted his own negotiation and presented it to the Chinese, and they refused. And President Truman couldn't allow this act of defiance to go on and was forced to fire General MacArthur.
Hey, Mr. President.
MacArthur?
What's going on?
Oh, you know, just commanding an entire nation during war times.
I know how it feels. Well, kind of made negotiations.
I see that happening.
What do you mean you made negotiations?
I was in a tight spot, but I just...
A tight spot? A tight spot?
Yes.
Get out of here, you're fired.
I hate you!
After MacArthur's firing, the Chinese were unwilling to negotiate, so fighting continued for a while. Nothing much happened, things pretty much remained the same. So, President Truman and the United Nations drafted up a new negotiation, and they went into talks with the Chinese and North Koreans, and those lasted for a few weeks, and everyone thought the war was about to end, but they couldn't come to agreement on some things, and so fighting resumed again. And then they went back into negotiations and again could not come to an agreement. So they went back to fighting, and this cycle continued until a few changes in office. President Truman was succeeded by President Dwight Eisenhower, and the U.S. had won a few battles in Korea, so they were in a much better position to negotiate. And at this point, the Chinese and North Koreans and the United Nations came to an agreement that the war would end at the 38th parallel, just a few miles above the 38th parallel, and a demilitarized zone was to be created on the 38th parallel, and it forbade any troops or weapons from entering Korea, and effectively stopped the fighting.
Now sniff it.